Welcome. Episode 5 of the podcast here. I'm so excited to not only show you guys what I got going on, but also share some information this episode. I think I've been a part of at least one podcast, a couple different YouTube video projects, and I think generally people are interested in the idea of podcasting, especially podcasting with video, or they wonder why a video is a good idea to also have the podcast. And what even is a podcast, or even naming it right now, I'm thinking about just like the general hoops that we set up for ourselves, that we make ourselves jump through, even though sometimes you don't really need that. It comes down to simplicity and a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of help along the way. So today, that is what I want to be for you. If I either know you and sent you this video, or if you found me somewhere along your YouTube searches, I want to take the next 25 minutes, go through my setup, my equipment, the logistics, and just some basic software things. And you, as a person, of just my initial impressions of this setup. I finished the setup for all intents and purposes. I don't know if you remember from episode 1 to 2, I described it as a big jump, and you can go back and check the 2 out. 1 to 2, big jump. 2 to 3, medium jump. And then they've gotten smaller and smaller. And now I think I've narrowed it down to, okay, this is the setup, including not only with the lighting and the general vibe, but with the camera settings and with the microphone settings. And I think it's a pretty foolproof setup that's simple enough. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort. But once you have it set up, then all you have to do is make a nice fire and sit and speak into a mic. So I'll go into a bit of my workflow, a little bit of my ideas, maybe help stoke the flame of you wanting to create your own podcast or even your own videos. I think I could be at least, if not a helping hand, at least I can point you in the right direction. Maybe give you some inspiration. But with that, you know me, I love the theory and philosophy, and I can go out on my soapbox and talk forever about things like lighting, about composition, about podcasts and social media and creation in general. So I did write down at least a few notes. Usually I had the map last episode and was just off the top of the head. This time I actually wrote down some notes. A bit of character development that we're seeing here in episode 5. Keep me on track a bit. Make sure I don't miss anything. And keep the ideas rolling. I think if I'm not clear on anything, or if you want me to go more in depth, feel free to message me or comment. And I'd love to help you do something like this. This brings me so much joy, not only doing this, but then the thought of someone saying, wow, that looks pretty cool. I would like to know how he does it, so therefore I can do it for myself and spread the joy that way. I think that's the ultimate goal. So you're doing me just as big of a favor as you might think that I'm doing for you, which is a cool thing. So first, I think the elephant in the room that I've addressed with the podcast project that I've worked on before, and just in general, is, does my podcast need a video? Right? Because at the end of the day, a podcast, some sort of radio show, it's the voice speaking into a microphone, and if people are listening to it in the car or maybe just as they're cooking dinner, why even need a video? Which I think is a great point. But I want to give you a few things to think about. The first one is, I think, the theory of video paired with audio, which brought me back to, I think it was JFK and Nixon. Even though I don't know if they overlapped in their presidential debates, but the very first presidential debate that was not just on the radio, right? So it was played on television. People actually got to see and listen to their eventual president. It swayed the election. I think it was JFK and Nixon, because Nixon was sweating a bit, and JFK, being a very poised, handsome man, really left an impression. So I guess you could use it in the other way, right? Of, oh, I don't want to, people to see me, but I think it's important to show face and to show who you are and get at least comfortable being in front of the camera. I mean, Nixon, even though he was he eventually became president, right? Like 2 election cycles later. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're like, oh, I'm freezing up in front of the camera. But just the idea that video influences just as much as audio influences just as much as video, it's almost 50-50, right? So by doing both, which if you're setting up audio, the video is just the camera and the lighting and maybe a bit of the set design and, again, throwing on a flannel, not doing too much simple things, but it goes a long way. So that will bring me to the next point of, it also doubles the amount of content you have. Probably even more so, but at least doubles. Because if you do want to share it with the world, and you might want to share the audio on some sort of SoundCloud or Apple Music, whatever podcast hosting site or app you would find and post it to. If you were to ever post it to things like Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and made reels or long form, now you cast a wider net, right? Which is a fun idea, and at least a fun concept of casting a wider net, maybe growing your audience if that's your goal. And at the end of the day as well, learning how to use a camera, incorporating it into your work, and having that in your back pocket moving forward for whatever you create. Super valuable. And again, this is such a simple, it's like you're doing the waltz, right? You have like 4 steps to do, and you do it on this beat, and boom, 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 and you get to have a fun time on the dance floor. That's what this is, right? You set up this camera, do a couple of things here or there. Now you get to have fun on the internet. So why video with audio when it comes to podcasting? I think that, right? Show face, build that trust. It's just as important to have that visual as audio, and audio as visual. You multiply the amount of places your podcast can go, and you get to learn and put to practice the simple camera tricks and techniques that you can have moving forward for whatever thing you want to do and create next. So camera is pretty important, especially nowadays. So that will actually bring us to our first idea, equipment. Equipment. I generally think you, the viewer, could be one of many people who's along any sort of journey, whether it's with content creation or camera work or podcasting work, right? But I think this is a good general guideline for anyone, which is, one, you could probably just use your iPhone, right? I wouldn't use your iPhone microphone, but I wouldn't be against, maybe I'll do that next episode or moving forward, is recording a video with the iPhone. I don't think it has to be cinematic footage. And we'll get into lighting later, but some good lighting, maybe touching up a few colors here and there, and you're there. If you have, and a lot of people have a nice camera, laying around, or maybe you have already bought a camera, have no clue what to do with it, or maybe you have some experience with the camera, then yeah, incorporate it. But generally, don't overlook the iPhone. Don't overlook a simple I should say, beginner camera. And yeah, just don't get too caught up in the equipment of it. If you are to go out and say, you know what, I want to be a camera person, buy the camera you want to buy, regardless of price, within reason. Right? Don't cheap out. I think when buying camera gear, I made this mistake. I bought, after I had my beginner level camera, I bought like the first tier camera, and then a few months later, I ended up using this higher tier camera, and it was like, oh my goodness, everything that I didn't like about this camera took care of. The one that you're watching on now, the Canon R6. I can link it down there if you want. But again, I generally, unless you're really going to get into photography, videography as your whole spiel, then yeah, don't overlook just the iPhone. But yeah, to that point, if you are to buy one, get the R6, but get the camera. If you don't know what camera to get, talk around, ask around, maybe even use some friends that you know that do photography just to get a feel for it. And that's an important thing. Maybe I can go a little bit more in depth on that at a later episode, but that's my general first thing about the camera. Secondly, with a camera or any type of content creation, speaking of buy once, cry once, a laptop. Now, laptops, generally, I think everyone probably has compared to a camera or a nicer camera. And I think the laptop is a incredibly important thing, not just obviously for content creation, but for everyday life. So maybe you can get away with convincing yourself to get a little bit more expensive one. But I would tell you the same thing. It's a buy once, cry once type of deal. Now, if you're starting to do video, you're going to need some space, some processing power. With a laptop, I wouldn't, and this is just in general, even if you don't want a podcast or if you don't want to do content creation, maybe you just want nice, I wouldn't cheap out. Maybe I wouldn't soup it up to the absolute max just because. But higher than baseline, and I think with some brands, I'm thinking of Apple. I mean, you can go as high as you can you can add an extra zero at the end of some of the prices with all the add-ons you can do. But generally, something that has a pretty good processing power, a pretty good amount of storage. Last thing you want is to be constantly reminded for this big investment that you make that, let's just say you cheap out in the space, and then a couple months later, if you go out and get a hard drive, and now that entire walk to Best Buy, you're kicking yourself saying, if only I bought the bigger space that cost $100, but now I'm buying this $150 hard drive, and now if I lose this, save yourself the headache. You don't have to soup it out, but definitely look at it in terms of like a 5-year investment. 4 years from now, you want to be using this thing, and you're like, yeah, this can operate how I want it to operate, which is tough in technology, but it's an important goal to shoot for. All right, so those are the two biggest expenses, right? The laptop and the camera, if you want. I think that's, again, the thing is you probably have an iPhone. Don't overlook the iPhone. You probably have a camera laying around somewhere. Don't overlook the camera laying around somewhere. And now we get to finally go maybe a little bit more into the easier to stomach, especially when it comes to terms of price tags. Which again, I think this can be as expensive as you want it to be. One is software. I use Adobe Premiere Pro. I love Premiere Pro. I also hate it. One, it did take a bit to learn. Broke my heart a few times just in terms of any video processing software is going to break down on you or do this. I think Premiere Pro does a really great job of not breaking my heart too much. It is a monthly subscription, which drives me a bit insane. It's not one of those things that you just download and now it's yours forever. It's a monthly subscription, which not my favorite style of purchasing things. But in terms of ease, once you learn the simple steps, and I don't think there's too much editing that goes with these. A few little touch-ups here and there. You can work on the audio within the system as well, which is really great. And I think it's what I'm comfortable with. So I think software, if you have iMovie or even a few little things on the phone, you probably want to be able to edit the audio to a somewhat point and the video to a somewhat point. And I think probably iMovie, which is free, or at least there's a freemium version. There might be other freemium video editing softwares. I wouldn't overlook those, especially if you're just doing kind of like what I'm doing, which is the long form content that doesn't need that much splicing, that many effects, anything. Keep it simple. Again, you might want to touch a few things up, slice a few things up, and again, maybe convert them to reels, but generally iMovie or Windows Movie Maker, don't be afraid to start small like that. Then moving on to the lighting setup, lighting and composition. So I'm really just I'm going to switch, instead of taking the whole camera off, I'm going to switch to an iPhone video just to show you guys the lighting really quickly. I have this one right here, which is it's a box light. This is my first time using it, and I really like the way it looks. Before I was using this guy, which, may have been a couple bucks here and there. But you can find little lights like that wherever. This is a bit more of a pleasurable experience because it is diffused nicely. Diffused just means there's like a layer in front of it, so it's not as harsh of light. And it's a good just kind of general light I noticed in the first few episodes, I was a bit dark, especially one side of my face. So I wanted to kind of put a little bit more attention on me without it being the light that would add the artistic flair, if that makes any sense. Like, this is just so you can kind of see what's happening. This light right here is the one that adds the artistic flair. And really, it's a reading. I found this in the house I'm living in. It's a reading lamp. You can probably find this at, I don't know if you're gonna. It's a reading lamp. You could probably find it at some sort of Savers, or you might have one in your basement. Your grandmother might have one. Your friend, yard sales. Lighting doesn't have to be too complicated. A nice light and like a lamp, and you could probably put on like an overhead light. Thing about overhead lights is that they're a little bit harder to control, right? If I wanted to switch this up, I'd be able to kind of move these around compared to the overhead light. I'm not going to, mess up the ceiling, move lights around up there. But these are easy because I can kind of play around with it. And it took me a few tries, as you guys know, to kind of get it to the point where I was like, yeah, this is generally right. And I might still switch them up. But yeah, 2 lights like that. I think if you look up some other videos, and they're right, if you start adding in some backlighting, some key lighting, some boom, 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 you can get pretty deep into the lighting rabbit hole. It's a beautiful thing to understand. I would somewhat hesitate against window lighting. As you can tell, I'm doing this at night. Just because throughout the video, it'll change, right? Maybe if you're not doing it midday, but if you're doing it around sunset in the morning, throughout the day, the sun might be behind a tree one moment, then out of the tree the next. So it's a little bit harder to control. Again, the lighting, it's really appealing to control the lighting. So those are my general thoughts. 2 simple lights. And again, I did episode 1, 2, and 3 with just one light, and it was fine. I would say do it in the dark, but at that point you're doing just the podcast. So don't do it in the dark. And this will kind of go on another touch point, just the minimal editing in general. Getting it right in camera, getting it right in microphone, getting it right with the lights. Much easier than having to go in, touch everything up, work a lot of magic. Getting it right, taking an extra second, make sure you're well exposed, that the camera is absorbing what it needs to absorb, that the mic is set at the levels it needs to be set at, the lights are where they should be. get it right in camera. Afterwards, you can throw on a filter on it or something like that to make it look artsy or cool, but it's a lot harder to fix that. A little extra focus on the actual raw footage goes a long way. Goes a long way. All right. I think before I go into logistics, I do want to talk about acquiring equipment. I think you can buy, you already have it, or it could be given to you. Now, buying it might seem like a appeal, and again, maybe I've touched upon this a bunch of times. If you have the money, maybe, but generally, I think it's a good idea to at least have a better idea of what you need, of what you want, and then be more precise rather than just go out and buy things and be like, okay, I don't know, is this the thing I really wanted, or is this the thing that's actually going to help? So definitely tapping into some resources, obviously doing some reviews, or even trying things out is really great. But you might need to buy some things. But don't make it, don't go out on a shopping spree. Don't put yourself in crazy credit card debt. Don't put yourself in any credit card debt to do this podcasting thing. It's much more fun when you don't have that type of, that relationship with all this equipment is, you cost me so much money, so much of my time, so much of my effort, and now do this thing for me. It's better, if you're going to buy something, make sure it's exactly what you want. You could already have it, which is probably the best thing to do, right? And you probably already have exactly what you need, pending a microphone, which actually I will also be going into. But again, you probably have a lamp, you have an iPhone, you might have a fireplace, or at least a nice spot in your abode that you can talk into a microphone, and that's really all you need. And then things can be given to you, which is obviously the best when the things find you, or those people find you, and they're like, well, either here you go, or pointing you in the right direction. That type of stuff generally I find happens after you start doing the thing, and after you start doing it, that's when those people are like, oh my goodness, maybe this person could use this microphone that I have laying around collecting dust, or this camera that I have laying around, or maybe I can sell it pretty cheap to this person. So I do think it's important to at least have that initiative first. Don't just bank on people giving you things or posting on, maybe it doesn't hurt, right? Posting on your story and saying, hey, anyone have a spare mic? Anyone have a spare camera? You might find them, but it's also nice, again, to show that initiative first. And so actually, talking about equipment one last time, the microphone. Now, this is about a $100 microphone. It's what would be called a shotgun microphone, which usually is put on the top of cameras for vlogging, I would say. Imagine that little thing on, camera. There's also, of course, you have like the studio mic, which if you can imagine, this is probably the most popular on the podcast, right? Which is you see the microphone, it's pretty big, pretty fancy. That probably would be the best way to go. And then there's also the lavaliers, which might look a little silly. I mean, definitely it would work, but those wireless mics that you have on your shirt. All three, obviously, as you can tell, the shotgun mic can be used. I just took it off the camera and I have it plugged into my laptop. All three can be used. Again, if you're going brand new, you might be looking probably $50 to $150 gets you there, right? For all intents and purposes, your audio should sound good. We talked before, about it's half audio, half video. Probably the audio is the more important thing. If it doesn't sound good, no one's going to watch your videos. If it doesn't sound good, no one's going to listen to your podcast. That being said, $100 gets you there. You don't need a $1,000 microphone. You don't need it. You need it close to your face. As I found out, again, from the past few episodes, closer to the face, the better. And incorporating it in an artistic way would probably be the best way to go. Maybe one of those studio mics. I think like Yeti might be called Yeti, like a Yeti type of microphone would be the best way to go. Or they're like those bricks that you can kind of, move around that you probably see in most of your podcasts. That goes through the general equipment. having your laptop, moving on to some sort of camera, whether it's just your iPhone or whatnot, and then the space that comes alongside with that, right? Like making sure you just have enough memory to hold the videos. The files don't have to be huge. I'm shooting them in 1080p. I learned that smaller the better, both for the laptop, both for the storage, my sanity. Smaller the better. 1080p is perfect. And now I'm going to go into some of the general logistics and what I have found has been really helpful for me of having this all set up. One is a general, of course, you need a time and place to do the podcast. Now, I mentioned I worked on other YouTube videos before. They took a long time because there were so many takes. I one take this. And I think that skill is super important, and learning how to slow down your speech, your ideas to where you're able to keep, somewhat on track. I know I kind of veer off here and there. I still have a lot to work on. Again, we're just episode 5. But you can get lost in the one more take. Just take your time, take a deep breath. If you mess up, pause and go back over your words. Don't worry too much about editing it out. I mean, is there someone watching it right now? This podcast, is there someone watching it right now? Maybe, maybe not. So having that just taking that pressure off yourself. Do it in one take. It takes me 30 minutes. I already have everything set up. It takes me 15 minutes to turn the things on. It takes me longer to get the fire started, honestly, is the most time-consuming thing. But yeah, you have a laptop out here. Having a place where things are already set up is really nice, right? You don't have to go through the lighting each and every time, and that's super helpful. I'm sorry, I just lost track. I also wanted to talk about having some sort of tripod. Shout out to the tripods. Very first episode, I have this claw tripod that I attached the camera to this exercise bike. That's how I did it. Terrible. Next few episodes, I had it on a light stand. Light stand really just goes up or down. So, and of course I could kind of swivel it in some sort of way. But speaking about things being given to you, my host was like, oh, by the way, I have an extra tripod if you need it. It's a lovely tripod. I don't know how much they normally go for. Get yourself a nice tripod, especially if you're already in the photography, videography space. Underrated. Really underrated. Really, I don't realize how much my heart gets broken when it comes to adjusting the camera and the angle and the look and the this and then that. Or when you're using a cheap tripod and you're like, gonna break this piece of plastic. So shout out to the tripod. Again, yard sale, tag sale, eBay, friends. Maybe in the meantime, put it on a counter or some type of, tape it on something, I guess, your camera, and just pray that you find a nice tripod like this, because my goodness, it's like, I'm so happy. So, that's the last piece of equipment. Shout out to the tripods. Again, sometimes it finds you. It's not a make or break thing, but it's lovely. So back to the logistics. That's the time and place. Having a time and place for things to be set up, and it being as seamless as possible in your daily life. And then that also goes into attach it to something you already do. Right? Like I was already making fires out here, and all it took was setting up the equipment. Now I just press on, right, to the camera and press on the laptop, which makes it so much easier. If I was not doing this, podcast, I would be literally doing this, looking at the fire and having all these thoughts in my head. The only difference is now I get to speak it into a microphone, and I have to not trip over the wires as I walk through here, which is a bit of a headache, but that's really the only difference, all right? which makes it so much easier rather than making it like a big, I got to drive 30 minutes this way and set everything up, and make it as easy as possible. Going out to my workflow, maybe I could, if there's enough interest, or again, if you're an individual that just wants to reach out to me, I'll sit down with you for 30 minutes and bring you through how to get things from conception to end. Right? So take me up on the offer, at least for the next, right now it's January 2024, for the next few months. Forever. Take me up on the offer. Ask me what's the workflow like, because your time is valuable. And you want to make sure, as much as fun as it is to tinker with some things and to, have your hands on every little thing, also not spending too much time, not doing too much effort on the actual processing of the videos, and just, again, simple things when it comes to the editing. And yeah, getting it from the inspiration to completion as enjoyable and painless as possible is a big thing. You don't want to be pulling out teeth doing something like this. It's already hard enough as it is to create content, especially consistently. Speaking of completion, I have here the kind of like the sites, like where is this going to live? Of course, I talked about some of the music apps or audio, radio apps. Of course, so maybe if that's where you think that would be a good place to live. But I love YouTube. I really think YouTube is the best space for content creation, and especially video podcasting, period. It's just the best for content. Again, maybe we can go in more specifics. If you're that interested, you talk to me about it. But YouTube is really fantastic home. It was incredibly easy for me to set up this podcast playlist, set up the account. Of course, it's free. And I just think it just, amongst a lot of benefits, it really gives the best chance for your material to live a good life. And I think that's all you want with your material. I think Instagram has its benefits for some things, but it dies off pretty quickly. Same thing with TikTok. And, Facebook, I would say, is probably up there. Maybe it's a bit of a different audience, maybe. Facebook, is not as known as much about video. Maybe it's more of just keeping up with your friends. This is what YouTube is for. Videos, video podcasting, long form content. And yeah, then just getting creative. And I also have a website and a blog. So I just kind of give a quick blurb about what I talked about, maybe like an overall synopsis that I try not to get too into detail. And then I have the YouTube video embedded. So I think it's also another thing of, again, the idea of creating that net, right? Like, how do they find this video? Maybe they found it from Instagram, from the YouTube search. Maybe they found it from your website. I think the more things you post to, obviously the bigger the net gets. If you start spending all of your time posting it everywhere, and, I think you could probably narrow it down to 3, 4, 5 places to post it, and you get 90% of the type of response that you want from it, or the type of exposure, whatever it is that you may want. So definitely there is an overkill, but I think your own website, one, or your business's website, and YouTube for the home, and maybe throwing some stuff out on Instagram, throwing up on the maybe SoundCloud or some of the other podcasting. I don't know where I don't really listen to podcasts, funny enough, right? If anything, I watch video podcasts. So I don't know where people, maybe it's Apple Music. I don't know if there's an actual podcast streaming thing, or maybe it would be on Spotify. So maybe someone could let me know about that. But yeah, I think having your own website, having your own blog, having your own YouTube, having a couple marketing channels, boom. That's a good net. You're gonna get some good stuff over there. And then finally, I want to talk about you as a creator. And I think the first thing I want you to think about is, more than anything else, it teaches you how to talk to a camera. I just talked about what you want to get out of your content, giving it a home for that reason. But I also think in terms of public speaking, speaking into a camera, storytelling, learning how to project the voice, a lot of benefits, even if nothing comes from whatever it is that you may be doing, which is unlikely, especially if you're consistent with it. But more than anything else, you learn how to speak to a camera. And as I mentioned before, doing it in one take teaches you how to kind of take the pressure off yourself, gives you a good chance to succeed. And yeah, redefining your expectations of perfection. So that's a fun exercise about doing something like this. You as a creator get to now work on those skills, telling the story, speaking to a camera, public speaking. And that also goes to the same with just being a creator. You get to learn about the camera, you get to learn about the laptop, different softwares. So a few different, regardless of the final result of your quote unquote podcast or long form video, regardless of the result, you're learning the skills. And these aren't easy skills to learn, number one. No one really has in school, right? No one never says, oh, just sit in front of this microphone and talk to it, learn how to hold a concise thought, hold on to interest. And two, camera knowledge, video knowledge, technology knowledge, it's going to transfer into whatever you do, with whatever it is you want to do with your time. I think the other one is just showing your face and putting yourself out there. Joe Rogan pops into my mind, biggest podcast in the world. And he just started putting himself out there. I think he probably started way before then, right? I think he was trying to start in stand-up. And then one day he was just talking about how much he liked UFC before, I guess, UFC was huge. And one of the guys was like, hey, do you want to ever call? Oh, you seem pretty interested in things. You seem like you know what you're talking about. You ever just want to call? And I don't think he got paid anything. Maybe just, nothing that he could live off. Not what he's getting paid now. But not getting paid anything or too much. But the fact that he just put himself out there. And then, obviously he found that he loved doing it. And now look at that, right? Like one thing leads to another. And that only happens when you put yourself out there. I've done both. I both, in my content creation, I put myself out there, and I both wanted to not be a part of the exposure party, the social media, the putting myself out there party. Better to put yourself out there for all intents and purposes, right? Again, I think it just comes down to not being too hard on yourself and having some fun with it. That's going to bring me to the last point. I don't even have to go to the journal list of the last thing I wrote, because it's always the last thing I say. But just have fun with it. Putting your own twists on it. And once you learn kind of like these basics, have your light, have the camera set up, have you slightly off center in this rule of thirds idea, like right about there would probably be the best. But who knows, man? Once you kind of learn the basics, now you just get to try it out for yourself. And if you pair it with something you already do, like sitting by a fire, having your coffee, doing some journaling, and you have a enjoyable, painless workflow, it's a really easy way to create content that is here's my biased opinion, right? Is good, right? Like I think this type of content is good content that lives a long life, that could either promote your product or business, or at least put your face out there to the point where maybe other opportunities pop up. And you get to have fun while doing it. Now, we can go into what to talk about or how to do this, or, how can I make this the most me? The flavorings, let's just call it, right? I hope this video is just hey, how to make a simple chicken breast, 350 in the oven, put it in there for whatever, 25, 30 minutes, it comes out, salt and pepper, that's a chicken breast. And you're like, okay, yeah, this is a chicken breast, but I could make this better, right? You can kind of pound out the chicken, you can put some seasoning on it, you can do it your own way. And now that either or that I would be able to point you in the right direction of making a chicken breast, now you get to add the spice to it. You get to create something that you're proud of and experiment, have fun with it. And that's where I'm going to leave you off. So again, I jumped. I think the notes helped, but I noticed myself still jumping around just quite a bit. So if you have any questions, whether it's interest, or if you have already tried and it hasn't worked out the way that you wanted it to, or maybe I give you a bit of information that you're like, wow, I actually want to try that, I just don't know exactly where to start, let me know. Shoot me a message, leave a comment, engage any way you can. I hope if this was not at least helpful, at least it was entertaining, or you enjoy listening to me and my voice, or just enjoy sitting by the fire here with me. That would also suffice. But if I do get to help, and if I know that I kind of either push you in the right direction or gave you the tools for you to do something like this for yourself, that would make me incredibly happy. Incredibly happy. Right? So let me know. Ask some questions. Give me some feedback. And other than that, that was episode 5. I'm really looking forward to some of the ideas that I have coming up for what I can speak on. I am happy that I have figured out my flow. I think that's how's this going to work. Now it's just fine tweaks, but I have my space set up, my things set up, and I'm going to make it as seamless as possible. So I think that was a bit of sharing that joy with you guys, if anything else, right? Just letting you know, hey guys, I think I have it. I think I have something that I can just pow, pow, pow. And now at this point, it's just setting up some fires and talking to them. So that's what I'm going to leave you with. I hope you have a great rest of your evening or morning or wherever in the world, what time it is for you. And I'm looking forward to hanging out with you again next time by the fire. A little bonus for you guys. So I had just started 5 minutes after the podcast transferring my videos over. And I just wanted to show you guys really quickly how I go about doing the quick edits and some of the color and sound correction and export settings and whatnot. So really quick, this is Adobe Premiere Pro 2024. If you never worked with Premiere Pro before, there are probably better tutorials and how-tos with other YouTubers. And also, you could probably spend hours learning the ins and outs. But generally, it's simple enough. Down here, we have the timeline of the photos and videos. Up here, we would have the video preview, so it would be what it would look like. And then you can also customize everything to have some effects put in and some color correcting and some graphics if you wanted to do text over it. It took me a while to kind of get into the right flow of it, but the important thing is that I had projects to work on, and you just learn through experience. So I did do, if I ever wanted to know how to add text into a Premiere Pro video, I would Google it or look up some YouTuber who would explain some things. And generally, that's the best way to learn. It's just on the fly, because you don't want to spend some time learning stuff that you're not going to use. You just kind of want to know what you need to know. So generally, maybe some color correcting, maybe some audio correcting, and how to cut videos up, and how to it was the first part I talked about, and now I'm blanking on it. But yeah, just the simple things, is what you're going to want to know. And those just come along with just experimenting and trying. So really quick too, as a quick disclaimer, this is what I use to record my audio on. So I come here, I'm actually going to turn it off, and I'm going to go away. So I'll talk to you guys in a second. And now I'm back. So generally, well, after you press done, you see the audio footage right there, the audio recording. And that's also what's happening now. So I'm also might click around a little bit, and it might boot me off out of nowhere. I'll try to keep an eye on it so I just don't end up leaving you guys. But the first things first is I bring the video in. Now the video is on my camera, as you guys saw. If you do it on your iPhone, you could probably just airdrop it. I don't know if there's a file size limit. Generally, if it's about 1 gigabyte or 2 gigabytes long, it will probably take a little bit, but you could also just get your charging cable and plug it in directly to your laptop if you have a Mac, or in another way. Probably those are the two best ways to do it, or just airdrop it or send it through Wi-Fi. And that's what I do with my Canon R6, is that it connects via Wi-Fi to my laptop, and then I can just transfer some things in. The file sizes take about maybe like 5 minutes. I mean, it sounds a lot longer than it actually is, especially because I was doing 4K before. It's pretty quick, all things considered, and it ends up in a file, which I don't know if it's going to boot me out, but if it boots me out, I'll be back on in a second. It did not boot me out. I'd actually just stopped talking because in anticipation of getting booted out. Let's see, I don't want to. There you go. Now I'm booted out. But I don't want this to be too distracting to you guys, because this wouldn't happen to you. You wouldn't be doing a voice over your video editing, but you would bring those videos in and you pretty much plop them on the timeline. Now, you might notice that there are 2 audio files. That's because this one is that mic recording that I'm using right here. This one is the camera audio file that is just kind of built into the camera, or it would be your iPhone video as well. Now, what we want to do is we just want to kind of move this down, and then we'll just match up that audio with this audio. So it might sound a bit silly when you put one over the other, because it'll almost be like an echo. But once you have it perfectly lined up, you'll just kind of hear it. And you can also, if you zoom in, you can notice that there are these peaks and valleys. So if you find a good part, which I think at the beginning of the episode, I say something along the lines of welcome. And that's a really distinct vocal kind of, you'll notice like a quick peak right there. And so what I would do is just find them and line them up. And then afterwards, again, I don't want to do too much because it'll boot me out. What I would do is just unlink the audio file, which is pretty easy to do. You right click, and then there's a menu that says unlink. And then, yeah, boom, you have the audio, quote unquote, attached to the video, as long as you don't move the 2 around. And now I'm going to have to go away because I want to start playing around with the timeline a little bit. But I want to show you guys what I generally do for the color correction and the audio correction. So you don't need to do it, but if anything, it's a nice little tool to have in the back pocket. I think it does boost the audio experience, and yeah, you get to have some fun with some of the artistic kind of filters and colors and different looks you get to add on to your video, and that's really the fun part. That's the seasoning I was talking about. So I'm gonna go away, at least right now. I might do a little voiceover. Actually, I might try to find a way to do a voiceover afterwards. So maybe I'll be here, maybe I'm not. Depends if I figure it out or not. And also another disclaimer: you wouldn't have this. I just noticed this video on this side. This was the last week's episode. You can notice again how little I edit it. I just added in some titles, and yeah, I mean there really is not that much to it. So normally you would go up here and press File, New, and then it would be like, oh, you want to start a new project, and you would say yes, and you would give it a nice little name. Well, I'll go through right now. Oh, and I'll do export settings for you as well. Other than that, I think this is going to boot me off the mic. So let me get to putting those things together for you guys. And yeah, I might hear you in a second. All right, so here I am. Now, just a disclaimer, I am doing this watching along with you, so I'm adding in this voiceover afterwards. So I might be following it just a little behind. This isn't real time. What I'm doing here is just moving the video file over and lining them up with that audio. So it's actually going to take me a second, take me a few tries. You notice I go down and put the two audios next to each other. Also, another disclaimer, I don't think that this is really a step-by-step tutorial. I'm not really getting into the nitty-gritty. More than anything, I just want to show you how easy it is to pretty much take care of the 80%. Right? We talked about in one of the earlier episodes how important it is. It's like 80% of the way there. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be good. So you want to get it to that point, and this is pretty efficient of getting it to that 80%. Unless you have more video or content creation experience with me, and that's a possibility. So, but yeah, so right here, again, I'm moving the two audios together. You can notice they're a little off kilter. You don't want that because you don't want the old Japanese movie, lips moving, nothing coming out. But even notice here that it's even, I have to zoom in a little bit more, because again, you really don't want to have it off at all, but you can zoom in a lot. So you can see pretty much exactly where the peaks and valleys are in that. So here I am going to unlink them. So I go down, I right click, hit the unlink, and then just delete the bottom file, the one that was attached to the video that came with the mic before. Now I'm just kind of cleaning up the timeline a bit. And yeah, let's see what I do next. I don't know. Again, we're scrolling through. I think what I wanted to do was I was thinking, do I just do it with the second video? But I think you just do that twice for the second video. Reason why I have to do two videos is because my camera stops after 30 minutes of recording. So, but you'll also notice those audio levels. So we're going to get into the audio correcting now. Now, generally, it is imperative, not a good idea, it is imperative to get good audio. And so what you want to do is test it out beforehand and make sure the microphone sensitivity is put to a level where wherever your mouth is going to be talking, that it matches up to where, if you want to notice where the kind of green bars are bouncing around, somewhere between the -12 and like a -3. So somewhere between there. And then you go over to those effects, you get what's called dynamics, and then you get what's called parametric equalizer. Don't really know too much about it. I learned this from another YouTuber, and I don't exactly remember the name. Full-time filmmaker, I want to say. This is his general go-around for making the audio sound nice. Again, imperative that you get it correct in mic. This is just maybe, again, some seasoning that it normalizes some of the things. So you go here to the dynamics. You go into the makeup. You put that at 8. The ratio, you put that at 3. And you also make it a soft compression. And you put the limiter on. So I think I do that in this video. Yeah, I put the limiter on. Again, if you want to ask why, I can answer. Probably terribly. But those are the 4 things you want to do with dynamics. Soft compression, makeup at 8, ratio at 3, and then that limiter. Don't pay attention to it right now. So this is what it will look like when you go in the parametric equalizer. You go back to that top menu and you go to soft compression. And then you just kind of move this on down to almost being flat, maybe a little bit above. And then putting just whatever that number is up to 8 as well. That's all you do here. This one I don't think affects it as much. Dynamics, I really think throwing in the dynamics is really important. It does make a difference. Parametric equalizer might be a little different, but yeah. And so then you want to just make sure that your audio isn't getting into that red zone. You can see that it goes green to yellow, and then if it went really loud, it would be in red. Don't want it in red, and you don't want it really low in green. You want it, again, at that -12 area. Here we go on to what's called Lumetri color. Again, not really a step-by-step tutorial. If you want one of those, let me know. But what I do is I go down to creative, and I throw in what's pretty much an Instagram filter. It's the equivalent. And they have plenty. You can go through them all black and white. Again, they probably have 50 built in to Premiere Pro. And I just like this one though. I like the goalie and blue tones. I think it kind of matches. And then because it kind of adds to the vibe, I put the faded film up and the vibrance. I usually find that whenever you export these videos, they're not as colorful as when you work on them. So I always just kind of oversaturate it just a little bit. And yeah, I mean, it just looks, I don't know, kind of adds that little extra artistic flair to it. But you can do this to your own liking. And this is, again, where maybe you have a little bit more fun playing around with it. I also, just as a side note, I put everything at 20, which is just easy for me to be like, oh, vibrance at 20 and fader at 20 and intensity at 20. It's just put everything at 20. I just do that just because it's easy for me to remember, and all the episodes look the same. Here, this is just putting general titles in. So you go into, I'm way behind on my voiceover. That bottom left, that T, that's highlighted blue right now. That T is text. You pretty much grab the text, you click it and drag it across where you want it in the video. You can also move that along the timeline. You can edit it to be almost like Microsoft Word. You can put in different fonts and different italics and boldness and whatnot. So again, not a tutorial, more of just a, hey, look at the workflow and what I normally would do. So these are export settings. Generally matching the source is a good idea. And then on the top right, if you see the video and it looks like it's in the right type of format and whatnot, that is ideal. You would name it something, your title, whatever it is. And I also do use maximum render quality, but generally that's what you do. You just press export. And usually a video like this would take maybe like 10 minutes. Again, sounds kind of long, but I don't know, go cook some dinner or something and you'll be all set. Now, if you want to convert it to Instagram Reels, what you'll do is you'll go into these things called sequence. Now, the sequence is kind of like what format your video is in. And you go to the frame size, and because they're vertical, what you can do is pretty much switch up that, the 1920, 1080, you can just make it vertical. So instead of being sideways, now it's framed up and down. And then what you can just do is grab the video, and this is what I typically do. And then I just zoom in a little bit. Of course, you don't get you don't get to see the fireplace anymore, which kind of stinks unless I kind of, I move it over. But that's how I would make it into an Instagram Reel. And again, you can use I think they have a captions feature on this, but most of the time I don't say too many words. So I just go in with the text box, and if I wanted to do captions, and that's how you would export. And it's pretty easy. I don't know when this video is going to clip out. I don't remember when I ended this, but I think I gave myself a minute here just to tell you how easy it is. Oh, there I go. And that's generally the vibe. Again, I've done this, I've done YouTube videos. First time kind of doing podcasting, but this is by far the simplest, by far the most direct, and by far the most enjoyable, right? Very low amount of editing, very low amount of buffering and headaches, and pretty fun, right? Like when you can do things just in one take and you don't need to cut up all the videos, add too many titles, add the transitions. You pretty much just do all the fun part. And yeah, I think the one thing, converting it to Instagram Reels, maybe going through it and now having to cut it all around and maybe take out your favorite parts. I don't know. I kind of enjoy that part though. So generally that's how easy it is. And again, unless you were having a notepad or you have a camera style memory, whatever that's, I can't think of the name, photographic memory, then you probably just were like, did this guy just have an absolute conniption on this tutorial video? Less of a tutorial video, more of a, this is the workflow. This is how easy it is. You export it, boom, on to the next one. I think that's really important. Again, I've been a part of projects where it takes a week. You know, you're working like 8 hours a day and, you know, just editing and editing and editing. And then you look at the time and it's midnight and you have a 5 o'clock shadow and you haven't eaten all day. And it's just not as much fun. Although those videos are cool, they serve their purpose. Draining. They are definitely draining. These, much less draining, much easier. This is Premiere Pro. Again, maybe some of this is overkill. I mean, all this is overkill. I mean, I have a fireplace here and, the fancy camera, a nice laptop, okay microphone. The whole get up is generally overkill for a person sitting in front of a mic. Even this little outro. If you're listening at this point, got to give me something. So there's something in the comments so I know I'm just not talking to thin air, even though it kind of makes me happy thinking that, I'm just speaking into an empty room here. But if you're still listening, let me know. But yeah, not generally here to show you the exact workflow. If you need help, if you need guidance, just let me know. I'll FaceTime you. I'll Zoom you. This is by far the most fun and most simple video project I've ever done. Simplicity, but also beautiful. I get the most enjoyment out of it. Overall, I know off the top of my head, I know at least 4 people, good friends, that could really benefit and could have a heck of a time. And, the world needs to see their work. So you might be one of those 4 friends. You might be another one of the 8 billion people across the world. But your voice still should be heard too. And this is a really great way to get that heard. So again, not a tutorial. Hit me up if you need any help. But just check it out. It's not that hard. It's kind of fun. But all right. Well, thank you so much for sticking around. And I will talk to you again soon.